Hi everybody, it's Lola. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I am a 35-year-old transgender woman living in San Francisco, California. I came out in 2018 and I had facial feminization surgery in 2018. I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time, and I tried filming this twice before, but I just couldn't get the vibes down. It honestly has me confused and reliving a lot of things that I had trauma from in the past. It's just been really a struggle to talk about all of this. So I just wanted to talk to you about my coming out story to my father. I came out to my mom separately because I lived with my mom and dad separately. There were a couple things that happened leading up to it. When I was really young, my dad had went to prison for manslaughter. I was about 3 or 4 years old, and he was in prison for probably like 4 years. I think he probably made some kind of deal because he was still really young, and this was in 1989, so politics were very, very different before. When my dad came out of prison, I was around 8 or 9 years old. So it was kind of like meeting him for the first time. I had like all these years without him, and even though like I hung out with my dad's side of the family all the time, he was just absent. So I felt like I had to re-meet him, and that was really hard because I was so attached to my mom. Now, I've always been very sensitive, and when I was really young, I was very, very sensitive. I would not really talk that much. I was really quiet. If I thought I was going to get in trouble, I would immediately start crying. And I would fight with my mom all the time and curse her out when I was young. I just had a lot of feelings. But with my dad, he really wanted to be my father figure. He really wanted to make a big influence on me and mold how I was going to grow up. At a young age, he wanted me to be a boxer. One of his best friends was a boxer, so we had different kinds of interactions around me fighting other kids my age, and me like going to a locker room where there's a whole bunch of sweaty guys, and he would take me to go shoot guns all the time. He would take me camping, we would go fishing, and it would be all men. He really wanted to make me very butch and masculine. So I kind of struggled with a lot of that because I was so introverted, and I really wasn't sure how I was going to be around him. He always wanted me to look a certain way, he would dress me a certain way, he would make me style my hair with a specific product, and I'd have to wear a stocking cap to keep my curly hair down. But he really had a big influence on what he wanted me to be. And it was hard to accept because we never had a bond. There was nothing growing up with him that I remember that was like, oh, my dad did this for me, or like, oh, when I did this for the first time with my dad. Like, I never had that experience. So it was very, very disconnected when I was with him. He would tell me things like, oh, like, when you were younger, you had more balls. And like, when you're like 10 years old, hearing that your father thinks that you're not masculine enough, it's very, very damaging when there's a certain expectation of you and you don't meet that expectation. I didn't know my dad went to prison. So one day I was in middle school. I think I was probably like 11. I had went into my garage and went through some old boxes because I was curious. And I found some old newspapers and I found some old letters from my dad. The newspapers were talking about my dad being arrested and the crime. And I found like little handkerchiefs that had drawings on there that my dad would make, and all these letters he wrote to my mom and me when he was in prison. It was really hard to hear that your dad went to prison indirectly. And specifically that he went to prison for shooting somebody. When I found all of these articles, I really started suffering from depression, more noticeably. I used to write a lot of stories and poems, so I wrote this one very, very graphic, violent story, and it got into the hands of a teacher, and then a counselor, and then my parents. We had a meeting with my mom and my dad and the counselor, talking about me needing support. My dad thought it was a good idea for me to live with him. When I was in middle school, I was probably 11 or 12. I went to live with my dad for a little bit. And this really lasted only like a couple weeks. When I was saying how he manipulated how I dressed and looked, he also would make me eat a certain way. And he would force me to have these protein shakes in the morning that had raw eggs in them and oatmeal and like hella milk and protein powders. And he would always make me eat more food. He was really trying to build me up so I was thicker. And honestly, I was 100 pounds. I was 5'6" or 5'7", and really just over 100 pounds. So it was really hard because he wanted me to look this certain way and be this certain way and have this vision of what his son would be like. But I never looked or fit the part. One day we were in the living room. I think it was in the morning. He was wanting to talk to me. And he came up to me and was like, "Hey, I want to talk to you. Is there something that you want to tell me?" And I'm like, is he really gonna ask me this? And I was like, "Are you asking me if I'm gay?" And he's like, "Well, are you?" And I'm like, yeah. And he was like, so furious. So furious. He didn't yell at me or like hurt me or anything. His instant reaction was, "Oh, are you attracted to me?" And to me that sounds like, "Oh, because you're a homosexual, you're attracted to every single male around you." Which is not true. Of course I'm not attracted to my dad. It really separated us. He would tell me, "I only accept you as my son and nothing else." Which basically means that I'm his blood, but all of my relationships, anybody that I love, he does not approve of. I never got over that. I never did. I don't think he ever did too. And what was really bizarre is that, like, I have to, like, imagine my dad being in prison. And I have to think about, oh, he was very aggressive and very macho, and he also went to prison. And being in prison probably really changed and formed a lot of his mentality, because he was probably like maybe like 21 or 22 when he went to prison. And um, so it was like really strange, because I keep having to think like, okay, I don't know what he went through in prison. I'm not gonna be sad about it or apologize for him and his behavior. That's who he is. And I can't change that. I really disconnected from my dad. I would see him on the weekends sometimes. In high school, I would rarely go over his house. There was one time when we were going to go to church. I'm Hispanic, and we were going to a Catholic church. I had a little bracelet on my wrist that was really, really tiny. It was like a piece of string or like elastic. And it was a bright pink. And he was like, "You can't wear that to church." And I'm like, okay. And he's like, "You have to take that off." And I was like, "I'm not going to take it off." And he was like, "Well, if you don't take it off, you're not going to church." And I was like, "Okay, I'm not going to church." So that was like one of the last times I really went to church. I was happy about it. So in high school, I was more open about my sexuality, and everybody knew I was gay. He, my dad would always say, like, "Oh, you gotta be careful, you know what happens to gay people." Meaning, like, "Oh, if you're gay, you're probably gonna get assaulted." He would also say things like, "Oh, you have to be careful when you go to your swim meet. You don't want to get AIDS from the pool." And he would say all these weird things that really were super homophobic and demeaning, and I could not enjoy his company. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, he told me he's only gonna accept me as his son, so whatever I do, it's not gonna matter because he's not gonna accept it. So I'm just gonna do whatever I want. And I kind of lived my gay life in high school. There weren't a lot of us in high school. There was probably like maybe 5 gay people in high school. There wasn't really like any idols. One of my drama teachers was gay, so she was like the one that everyone hung out with during lunch or after for drama class. There wasn't really that much representation of gay people. Of course, there was RuPaul, but when I was younger, the death of Matthew Shepard was really telling of what I need to be aware of. The death of Matthew Shepard really kind of painted the picture for what I was going to be prepared for. So I would leave school every day afraid for my life that someone was going to fight me. I would walk the halls, people would yell at me, say all these slurs, throw things at me, and I was always scared. I really didn't think I was going to make it through high school. I'm from Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley, which is still part of LA, but it's like an island outside of LA. So there's a lot of people are bussed in from LA County to my high school. A lot of people had like more troubled living situations with our parents, or were like not really well off. So there was just a lot of different conflicts people had that made them more aggressive. There were a lot of like shootings that happened in my neighborhood, and we had like lockdowns, and security would go around patting people to see if they had any weapons or drugs on them. That happened to me when I was in the ninth grade, and it was just a really hard school to go through. When I graduated high school, I knew I wanted to get out of that city. I had to. I knew there was something bigger out there for me. So, 3 months after I turned 18, I left to San Francisco. Now, my dad was not super financially well off, and in fact, I think he would pay child support to my mom, but he would give me like $100 maybe once a month when I was in school. But he never came to visit me in San Francisco. He was floored about the pricing, and this was in 2003. And he did not support me living there because of how expensive it was, and probably because it's known as a gay town. We had a lot of different interactions that were very, very distant, and I never really talked to him that much. This is kind of like no one really had cell phones necessarily, so we would kind of just like have to call each other here or there. When I got closer to 21, it had been like months and months and months since I had seen my dad, and I had decided to see some of my dad's family, who I pretty much stopped seeing since I turned 18. When I saw my dad, he was really surprised to see me. It was kind of like he didn't want to embrace me, or be like, he wasn't excited to see me. So it was really strange because I haven't seen him in like probably like 6 months or a year. And I hadn't seen my grandma or my godmother or my little cousins. And it was really strange because the men in that side of the family really didn't embrace me. They were kind of giving me like this look like, why are you here? My dad and my mom obviously did not last. They broke up when he went to prison, I think. But they never got married. My dad and my mom would have a lot of fights with each other because he was so absent when I was young. And also because he would not always pay child support. So he would like want to see me more, but almost like just to pay less child support. So I was like very iffy about the whole situation. I was very uncomfortable about seeing him. When I saw him that day, my mom was going to come by and pick me up, and he said, I don't want your mom here. I don't want her coming on my property. Like, tell her to pick you up somewhere. And I was like so mad because my mom had been supporting me since she was in high school. My mom had me when she was 14. She had to take care of me and work at a really, really young age just to support me. So I was really offended that he was trying to pin me against my mom, kind of. I just realized that, like, he is never going to be happy with me. He's never going to accept anything about my lifestyle, who I love, and I basically was like, I cannot talk to him anymore. My 21st birthday came along, and he called me, but I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, and that was that. called him back. He never called me back. He never tried to reunite with me or try to reach out to my mom to see how I was doing. So I really struggled with this idea of disconnecting from my father. I felt like I couldn't be around that side of the family. My grandmother spoke Spanish only, so we had very little communication, but we understood each other, but we were never really close. So a couple years later, I talked to my mom, and she told me that my grandma had passed away. She found out from a family friend, and I was so angry. I never got to say goodbye to her. I never got to mourn her. I never got to see her or give her a hug because my dad never told me. He completely disconnected me from that family. And what's also weird was that, I mean, he got married and he had 2 kids. So when my dad had his second kid, he had a boy, and he named his son the same name as me. I was very angry about that. How could you, like, have another kid and try to replace me or calling him the same name as me? And I had so much resentment towards him because of all of these things. What's hard about this topic is that coming out as trans, I really am scared about seeing my father ever again. I look different, I sound different, my attitude is different, and my heart is different. I'm in a new place where I have so much love from people and so much support that it's hard to want to be like, hey, you're that asshole who kind of abandoned me. Let's hang out again. Oh yeah, I'm trans too. I can't really imagine that happening. So it's been really hard because I had so much attachments and memories with my family that all kind of left and disappeared. I do think about what it would be like to see him again, but I think the only way I would ever see my dad is when he's in a grave. And I know that sounds very morbid, but he hurt me so much growing up. And there is no amount of therapy and no medication that will help me get over this pain. I'm never gonna get those experiences back, and I have had a new life for me. I just want to reach out and try to be the best person I can be. I know that sounds cheesy, but I just don't want to feel any kind of pain from all of the hurt that I had from him. I don't want anyone else to feel like they're in pain for being neglected by their father or their mother or their sibling, um, or being rejected. And I have so much empathy for people who are coming out at different ages. I don't know what it's going to be like when I grow up. I don't know what my life is going to be like, but I still have all these experiences that I'm dealing with 15 years later, 20 years later. I just want to share this little story with you, and I hope that you can find it in your heart to think about someone that you love and really let them know that you care about them, because one day they may not be there and you may not have that option to give them a kiss goodbye or a hug or a handshake. I really want you to think about all those people that mean something to you and say a prayer for them. Send them light, send them love, and enjoy your night. Bye.